I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. Overcast day in New York City. That is not stopping Andrew Kuo from having a sunny demeanor. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. Grateful to be starting 2025 in my house, in safety, and in relative comfort, which is a lot more than a lot of our friends out there, man.
Yeah, the last week has been really shocking as far as the fires in the Los Angeles County and area go. And as someone who doesn't really understand entirely the geography of Los Angeles, I don't really know who is imperiled and who isn't or what neighborhoods, but every day it's like, hey, I lost my house and all my possessions, or I'm evacuating. So yeah, heart really goes out to all those people, whether it's, Malibu or like the more working class neighborhoods. Like the whole thing is just terrifying, and I can't imagine what it's like to go through that.
Yeah, it has this kind of terror that feels surreal, especially in a place like Los Angeles, watching people through their own phones pointing at a flame in the distance being like, we're fucked. And then an update immediately on Instagram being like, I lost everything. Like, it's just insane. It's like I have my dogs, and everyone has been like relatively gracious about it. I'll read posts and people will be like, hey, I just wanted to give you guys an update. I'm safe. My partner's safe. My kids are safe. My dogs are good. We lost everything. But there's other people who had it worse. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, to overgeneralize, if we're arguing about the biggest topics in the world, whether that's like borders or climate or money, it's always about like who's allowed to live where and on whose terms. And to have your home decimated like that is a fundamentally like leveling, for lack of a better word. Like it's just insane, man. I just can't believe it.
Right. I know what you mean. I think there is the experience that so many people are going through, which makes it identifiable and, as we said, less individualized. To be like, I can't believe this happened to me. It's like, no, this is happening to literally everyone and all of your neighbors. So it's like a mass casualty effect in that way, which, it makes it more difficult to be like, yeah, but my situation is way different and way worse than everyone else because it's so visibly affecting a zillion people. Yeah. And I also do think a lot of these people are in some form of shock, because how could you not be?
It's insane. Right. It doesn't sink in until much, much later. And as human beings, I don't blame anyone for trying to make sense of it. How much money does someone have? Why do we care about Paris Hilton? This rich person's house, JJ Redick's house, burned down, but didn't he just move there? It was just a rental. Why does he care? His contract is worth this much. I'm like, the stability of a home is insane, and what we're seeing in the world, especially what's happening in the Middle East, is like truly scary, because it is like the upheaval of that kind of like mindset of like, I think our buddy Yasi, who lost her house, was like, man, don't feel bad for me, but like I used to have coffee on outside at my table. Like I really loved my house. I had a collection I've been working on. She does like Bandsplain, a collection of like posters and magazines I've kept for 30 years. It's all gone. She's like, I'm alive and well and I'm young, but like, God damn it. I'm like, that's crazy, man.
Yeah, I mean, there is, of course, the truism that it's just stuff, but it also isn't just stuff.
I agree.
There things have different values to you. Like, yeah, that chair that's across the room from you, your cuck chair, for example, that may just be stuff. But
I had
the
some good
cuck chair
memories
that
on
was,
that cuck chair.
but the cuck chair that was passed down to you from the man who cucked your father, and the man who cucked your grandfather, and the man who
Watching
cucked your grandfather's grandfather. That is 4 generations deep in cuck chairs. That's different from just a typical cuck chair.
watching Tony Kukoc win 3 in a row in that chair, insane.
That's not just stuff. That is a dynasty cuck chair.
Hmm. And like, I started doing inventory on my life as I was watching this all happen in real time with everyone else. And I was like, what would I take? What would be valuable to me? How do I prepare for this? And I'm just like, all the cookies archive first.
First and foremost, I'm not laughing at the situation. I'm laughing at you struggling under the weight of the cuck chair strapped to your back as you attempt to flee the premises.
Yeah, and the interns are shaking their cage, just being like, just throw us the key. We'll let ourselves out. I'm like, no time. Good luck, everybody. Here's more gruel. You deserve it.
But so anyway, yes, no laughing matter other than the visual of you staggering under the weight of a cuck chair. That is funny. The situation, unfunny.
Also,
Because
yeah,
in this situation,
funny,
you're saving the cuck chair.
Right. Also, in the most gravest of times, jokes are fine. I don't want to do the whole like this is no time for joking. But goddamn, so we are selling. We reprinted our Jeremy Lin shirt in a small run, an LA Lakers shirt, and we're gonna give 100% of the proceeds to a food bank in LA, and maybe another charity if we find one that we like. And yeah, if you go to our shop and you purchase one of those shirts, we're just gonna shovel that money towards people who need it.
Yep, it's the classic Jeremy Lin Lakers tee. It's a variation on the one that you made that Lil Peep famously wore. That was a Houston Rockets Jeremy Lin shirt.
Right.
We originally, there's a lot of permutations of these shirts. Some were when you were doing it as a little cottage industry, some were opening ceremony, and these were part of a cookies drop from years ago that were all long sleeve.
Yeah,
all long sleeve white tees, and a couple were Knicks, and we made one with the Lakers and Jeremy Lin. So bringing that back, and as you said, 100% of the profits going to food security for vulnerable people in the Los Angeles area. So
we'll figure out something else too. We'll brainstorm about how to help those guys because, I'm
it's
partial.
like you're making money,
Yeah,
or it's like you're giving money. One of the two.
right. I mean, it's I don't want to humble brag, but we have many friends, and a lot of those friends lost fucking everything, and it is blowing my mind. And I'll open up my feed, and it's another person being like, I lost my house. So it is resetting my brain in a lot of ways. So we'll figure it out as everyone else figures it out too.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it's hard out here all over, man. They're dealing with fires and the loss of all of their worldly possessions. But here in New York, we're dealing with congestion pricing. So, and
what's more important? It's hard to tell.
Well, maybe we should get some GoFundMe's going for motorists who are struggling to pay the new $9 tolls that are required to make it into Manhattan.
Listen, every Jeremy Lin New York shirt pays for a little more than 4 rides into the city, downtown.
100% of profits are going to vulnerable commuters.
Listen, if $9 is going to break your bank and you want to get your Mapo Martini at Chez Linguini's, it's on cookies, man. You can do that 4 times this week. We got you covered. As long as you buy Jeremy Lin.
This is a Magnum.
A Mapo Magnum?
A Mapo Magnum. Mock-tini.
A Mapo Magnum Tini?
Yeah, for MAGA.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, they drive in with their Mazda. We'll pay for that mileage.
So, the early returns on congestion pricing are in, and everybody is simultaneously right and wrong. So there
See,
was
I was right. Let me just see what happened though.
just as I suspected, I was correct. So there was an
Free
image.
Young Thug. Let me see what he did.
So there was an image of Canal Street, not far from Chat Square, which is now called
Ben.
Chet Square, but we'll get into that later.
Everything is not far from Chet Square if you're in the right mind space.
All roads lead to Chet Square.
Wet Noodle
So
City.
this was corner of Canal, and I want to say Bowery, and it was image, very little traffic. Now, for the sake of this conversation, we'll leave alone that it's been like 19 degrees and it's post-holiday, not much is going on.
Sober
So
January.
there are some mitigating factors here, but the photo was juxtaposed next to the typical traffic on Canal Street and said, look, there's no cars here. And then look at this other photo and it's jammed with humble motorists. And everyone took the side that one would predictably anticipate. A anti-vehicle bike maniac was like, it's working. This is perfect. There's no cars. And then you have a pro-business zealot on the other side say, we have murdered a thriving neighborhood of Chinatown. What about the businesses? Everybody wins, apparently.
Yeah. And people are like, it's creating a significant amount of revenue from nowhere for the city. And other people, it's like the city just gets to get richer. Mayor Adams gets to buy a new house in New Jersey while we're not even allowed to set foot in downtown Manhattan. That's an interesting intersection too, because I'm not really sure how it works, but people coming from Brooklyn on the Manhattan Bridge at that intersection would have to pay $9.
Yep, for sure.
That's that's a quarter of a Marlboro Magnum, half of a Marlboro Martini.
If you do the math, yeah.
Hmm. I don't do math though. I'm Chinese.
Which we don't do.
No.
So I have evolving thoughts on congestion pricing.
Let's do it.
No, I'm saying without relitigating my position, which was I don't like the economic
fish is
element.
learning to walk. Let's go.
Learning to walk. I don't mind. Look, I'm one crash out away from locking in, Andrew. Just one. I'm one crash out away. But my thing is that if you do the math, as an Asian has trouble doing,
Just give me the bill.
and you say, all right, I'm going to take the subway in and out of the city. That's about $6. And you drive in, that's $9.
If you pay for it. Yeah.
If you pay for it. If you don't bend your license plate and whatnot.
Right.
But I guess I hadn't really thought that like the subway also cost money in my mind. And I'm like, wait,
It's not cheap.
it's a $3 difference. Well, I should just be enjoying the fruits of less traffic, and I should be driving way more than I was
Math is
before.
mathing. Yep.
Because before this, I was like, well, look, I don't drive into the city because it takes too long. I would, look at Google Maps or Waze or whatever, and be like, ooh, 45 minutes to get into the city. That's definitely train season. Now I'm like 18 minutes and a $3 difference. It's golden days for the motorist. The motorist is back in New York City, Andrew.
Yeah, and it's ethical traveling. I guess the people hopping the turnstile would be foul baiters, because I would say a third of the people I see in the subways don't pay for the ride, which is like $3. Even though cops are cracking down, they're giving out more tickets. So the revenue of tickets is a whole different issue. But yeah, if you're just talking, oh my God. I used to equate all money in terms of compact discs. So I'd be like, listen, I can have this BLT from this deli, eat it on the A train, but that's like half of a Hard Knock Life single. Or like that is half of a Wrath of the Math CD that I can get for like $9 at CD Sounds. So like doing this kind of math is tricky, right? Because $3 paid on top of the subway that you pay for. You're in a car, but let's say you have to pay for parking. Like, where are you going to park your car? And then at that point, you're like, well, how many minutes does it take for me to park? Because the subway lets me right out at Chet Square. If I'm in a car, I might be looking for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. That's a lot of mapo you could have had in your gullet.
I'm wondering how much the decline in vehicles will make it easier to park. TBD. Also, I do think this will kind of find a neutral buoyancy anyway.
I agree. It's new still.
Where, yeah, it's new. And people are resistant to paying it and are taking public transportation out of spite. Oh, I'm not paying you that $9. I'm going to pay $6 to ride the subway in. And after a while, I think it'll be a bit like, hey, when you take the GW Bridge, you pay it. That's what it is. And I think once people get acclimated to it, it's like, all right, that's just the deal. You're going to pay X amount of money to take this bridge or X amount of money to go beneath 60th Street. Traffic will pick up again. It may not be as bad as it was, but ultimately, to me, that's kind of what the win was supposed to be for this system, which was that there would be less traffic and more money being made. That's just sort of the neutral buoyancy is the sweet spot. It's not what the anti-car zealot would look at Canal Street devoid of cars and be like, yes, this is exactly what congestion pricing was supposed to do. Make it a wasteland of concrete.
I am so weird about this, but what I'm surprised no one's talking about more is with the people trying to skirt the law by taping over their license plate, by shooting lasers at these cameras, or even the subway turnstile jumpers. And, I know I sound like a teacher's pet here, but the city and society is kind of tempting individuals to be like, what side of right or ethical or wrong are you? Are you willing to chalk up this win of not paying this toll as a part of your acceptable life? And I'm like, what does that do to a city of people? Because I think collectively we have decided that the small victory of not paying for the subway is morally sound because of the miseries we experience throughout our New York City day, whether that be a rat crossing our feet or an expensive tipping situation or a garbage truck stinking up my block. And people are just like, you know what? City's tough. I don't want to pay for this, and I'm fine with it. I'm going to walk through the handicap doorway to the subway as someone's holding it open and people are flowing through. But as soon as you break that barrier, there is coming back, but there sometimes isn't coming back. You know what I mean?
I would also say that scamming public transportation is kind of a cherished thing everywhere.
I agree.
And people
Some
do
people
it
don't
more.
do it, though.
I agree. I mean, I don't really do it. Like if the door is open and people are going through it, sometimes I'll just walk in, but I'm not hopping a turnstile. Like I'm too old for that.
Do you tip on a product? Like if you bought a bag of bucatini, a sack of organic bucatini, and there was a tip option, do you pay the general store person?
No.
I kind of do, right? Because like that's the transaction they're asking for. I could put the bucatini back and not buy it and buy it somewhere else. But like you kind of got to do it, right? It sucks. It doesn't make sense in my mind, but they are offering a service.
This is true, and I'm pro tipping. I mean, I tip for coffee. I tip for virtually everything. I just feel like the grocery store tip amount. If they put a little bucket next to it, and I've got like a dollar in my thing, I'll throw it in there. Especially if they're bagging it up while I'm like paying for it, and they're throwing things into my big cookies rucksack, my giant blue embroidered cookies tote bag. Mm-hmm. It's like I'm making groceries, but
like I didn't tip my groceries this year. But
I'm saying if they load it up, like I'll put like a buck into their cup, but they aren't even broaching the idea that there would be a percentage of your grocery bill, which is kind of wild. Like Oh, your groceries came to $100. 20% of that goes to the cashier. I'm like,
It's crazy. It does not make sense, but like it, if you live in a apartment building, you tip your person who takes out the garbage. You tip the doorman if you have one. You tip everybody involved in this mechanism, which is where you live. And like, I didn't
I
tip
support
my
that.
yeah, right. So I go to this Key Food every kind of day, and uh, I wanted to tip them, but I didn't know everybody in the shop. So I just like dropped off a box of cookies for them and left them with the manager. Yeah, I didn't know what to do. And whatever, this is some teacher's pet bullshit that we don't have to get into. But the idea of like paying back to society is interesting. And like, as soon as you decide you don't want to do it, it kind of changes the tenor of a city. Do you know what I mean? And I understand why someone in red Florida or Texas, whatever, would say like, "Oh, look at this crowded street. New York City's a hellhole. Oh, look at this empty street. New York is a hellhole." But I'm like, we have a moral conundrum right now, right?
Well, I think you're making a point that's larger, whether it's about the unwritten rules of the society
Mm.
and how they change and how they evolve, and clearly tipping without making this about tipping. But that's one thing that maybe, I don't know, maybe in the 1920s, everyone tipped constantly. And then it went away.
Here's a shiny penny for you. Hey,
This is what I mean, right? It's
Michael
like
Jordan's the best player ever. Yeah,
it's like here comes, the
Bob
in
Cousy over here.
in Goodfellas, like they're going to Copacabana and you're just there tipping everybody as you
Look at your
walk
shine
in.
box. Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
exactly, it's just tipping left and right. Oh yeah, cheers, shiny nickel for you, son. That kind of thing. And then it went away, and then it was like, okay, it's just at restaurants, and now it's a barista, and then it's like, okay, it's I
Post
guess we're tipping
pandemic.
for everything again.
Yeah,
Right. So
and
those
technology,
sort of
right?
those sort of changing, yes, tech is a huge part of it. These changing sort of social mores, like what do we expect from each other? And this was the debate from Reservoir Dogs that you had some people in your friend group like, yeah, I agree with that I don't tip anymore. Like, oh, I know we all watched the movie, man. Okay, Mr. Pink, relax.
Right, right. I mean, this is kind of like a funny conversation to have start at Canal Street, which is known for its illegality, and its bootleg culture, and it's kind of siphoning from uh like legal commerce, into a realm of illegal commerce. And I was a participant in that. I bought mixtapes, I bought bootleg stuff. I still enjoy that soul of Canal Street, but I've become a goody two shoes where I'm just like, hey, the city needs you to pay your dues, man.
Yeah, you have become a notorious teacher's pet.
I'm saying pay your taxes.
So there was look, it's just a debt to society.
Mm.
There was a tweet the other day, I think it was like 4 days ago, by a woman named Mariama James. I guess she's a New Yorker. I don't. It says Manhattan Dems Vice Chair 9/11 survivor. All right, I don't.
Sounds like a bot. Sounds like a bot.
Honestly, it's
That is just a hit list of shit. No, that's not a real person.
yeah, it's pretty body.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, it's bottish behavior. Their tweet says New York has gone from being the city that never sleeps, in quotes, to
I
quote the
love
city
this.
that's in bed by 9 p.m. and sleeps in as often as possible, thanks to transplants.
It's the Haitians. It's the people seeking asylum. I mean, sheesh. Did the gatekeepers of Chet Square, did Chet Holmgren write this? Because, for me, I like a bar where I can move, maybe dance a little bit, move freely without the hordes of immigrants in my way as I'm having my Mapua Mock Magnum.
Like, no, I don't mean that.
No, not that.
No, 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 no. That's not what I mean.
No, I mean the
Uh,
other thing.
so I was thinking about that point she made, and trying to figure out like what's the validity of that the transplants. And I think first off, not every transplant is created differently, Andrew. And I don't mean
Mhm.
that as like, well, some transplants are cool and some are lame. Like some
Mhm.
transplants drive like this, other transplants drive like do 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 do.
Yeah, yeah.
No, no, no. I'm saying that the idea of transplants being a unified block, well, if you are someone who is a native New Yorker blaming transplants, you would also believe that no one can actually ever become a New Yorker who is a transplant. Therefore, an 80-year-old transplant and a 22-year-old transplant are one and the same in terms of being transplants. So I just think for the sake of this conversation, let's just differentiate here. Because a 24-year-old transplant, whether they're in college, just out of college, didn't go to college, in New York chasing their dreams, their creative endeavors, their pursuits, here to have fun because their friends moved here. Those transplants are a huge part of the nightlife and late night industry. I would argue probably the foremost group
Mhm.
if we're going to consider people who don't work the C shift or people who do work the C shift being different from transplants. If we're going to
Yeah.
say immigrants, because immigrants are really the late night community in New
Yeah.
York. It's not partiers, it's immigrants. But for the sake of what I believe she is talking about, it would be, and is blaming transplants, young transplants are the lifeblood of the late night ecosystem in New York City.
Old heads don't get high on their own supply. Get out of here, man. They're hunkered down, raw dawing NFL and NBA games in their one bedroom apartments. But like the thrill seeking other people with a capital O, they're the ones dancing to that devil's whistle, with their strange drinks. And like I was thinking about transplant because like I was born in Queens. I don't really feel like I'm a New Yorker. I never have, mostly because I'm Chinese. Shout out to Chinatown, but like I don't feel like a New Yorker. But I'm New York enough. Um and like the idea, I mean, obviously this bot is trying to whistle a tune about politics and MAGA stuff and originalism and the Declaration of Independence and the all that stuff. Jesus, maybe even, but I think like there is a truth to what that bot is saying because post pandemic, nightlife has staggered a little bit, and it was getting chopped down by the city itself. Like the city was kind of restricting liquor licenses, bullshit laws like cabaret licenses where you can't
Mm-hmm.
dance at certain hours. They shut down all of the West Side clubbing, which was like a big deal growing up. That's all gone. Terminal 5 is now like a ticketed place where Lana Del Rey performs instead of like a dirty club. Um, and you know, I could blame Bloomberg, but yeah, I think as an old head, it feels appropriate for me to say it ain't what it used to be. But there's still incredible shit out there. And if I was lucky enough to be 21 again by some miracle, I would have a grand old time in New York City in 2025.
I think it's indisputable that there is not the late night scene that there once was.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's just true. The amount of like places that stay open, places that were crowded, places you could eat, just generally speaking, it is not as late night in
Get
the
into
city as it
trouble.
used to be.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think you could find an array of factors like Manhattan just becoming too expensive for younger people to live in. Also, I think the diaspora of people going throughout Brooklyn and balkanizing these neighborhoods where when we were younger, everyone hung out in Manhattan. That was just what you did.
Orchard
Everyone,
Street,
whether you
Ludlow,
lived in Manhattan,
Hell Square
when
#1.
you didn't. If you lived in Manhattan, you hung out in Manhattan. If you lived in Brooklyn, you hung out in Manhattan. The idea of going to a neighborhood bar back then was like, all right, we're doing nothing. This is like
Right. Turkey's Nest was a
non
nothing night. Right.
non-night. We're gonna go and
Rosemary's
just like
was nothing. Right.
exactly in Williamsburg, Carroll Gardens, Crown Heights, whatever. It's like, hey, we're not doing shit, so let's just walk
Enid's.
down.
Nothing's going on. Meet me at Enid's. Right.
And I mean that era, at least that was a little more of like, oh, there's people here. But it used to be like, it's just gonna be, you're not gonna like meet someone of the opposite sex. You're not gonna have a big night out. It's literally, you're just gonna have a drink with your friend.
No one's gonna have drugs. There's no good music. Yeah.
No, it's just, there's literally a third space that we can go and have a beer in and shoot the shit for a little while to get out of the house.
Loved it. Great.
No,
Great shit.
Valuable
Some of the
thing to
best
have.
nights. Yeah.
Right, like the traditional use of a bar, basically.
Yeah. Exactly.
But there is not that critical mass of a late night crowd, even as every Brooklyn neighborhood has developed more of a scene of bars and restaurants, maybe a lounge, whatever. I'm just coming up with some examples of nightlife. But now it's like, well, Greenpoint, you can go hang out in Greenpoint, but Greenpoint's not a late night area, but it's filled with people along Manhattan Avenue, Hell Square 9. Like, you go to Williamsburg, there's people all over the place. You go to Southside Williamsburg, there's people all over the place. You go out to Bed-Stuy, you got a drag. You go to Franklin Avenue and Crown Heights. I think there's 10 bars on that stretch between Atlantic and Eastern Parkway now.
Yeah.
I was looking the other day. Back when, like, early 2000s, there were zero. Like, literally there were none. You had to walk over to Vanderbilt or Washington Avenue. It was a 15-minute walk to get to a single bar. So the idea that transplants have changed neighborhoods from late night neighborhoods to being early neighborhoods, I think it's really the opposite as far as Brooklyn goes. Like, these neighborhoods were super fucking residential and sleepy. And then younger people moved in, people with roommates moved in, people who wanted to stay in the neighborhood and go to bars and hang out. Nightlife is thriving in those neighborhoods in a way that it never did before, but it's at the expense of Manhattan, in my opinion.
All true, right? And like, I think at any point in any year, you can assume the kids are right. The kids, by definition, are correct. And the duty of a young person is to think the generation before them are cringe, right? Be like, well, why would I want to go to Enid's? Why would I want to go to Spa and get like dumplings and a glowing cocktail? It's like, I want to do my own thing. And kids aren't necessarily drinking as much because they have better ways to get high, right? They have better entertainment. They have smartphones, which we never had. When I got my first smartphone, I noticed how differently I would do things, because without any sort of phone, I would just stick in one place, Maxfish, and my friends would kind of find each other there because we had no way to find out where we were. It's just like, well, it's around 1 a.m. Let's go to the Fish. I'm sure X, Y, and Z are there. I'm sure Dietrich's there in the corner bitching and moaning about some shot percentage shit, right? And like,
Woe's here claiming that coaching doesn't matter. All right.
Yep. And now that the technology has made all of our lives so much better, is like, there's options, right? So a centralized hang spot in Manhattan is harder to sustain than people who are just like, I remember when we were throwing a party in a club and there was no phone service in the basement of Santos. And the promoter was like, is this good or bad? And I'm like, well, if we get people here, it's fantastic. If we can't get people here, we're done, because people won't come here because you won't get enough scene reports, you know? And technology does a weird thing to it where when people say it ain't what it used to be, I'm just like, but you're not telling the whole story.
There was a clip that went somewhat viral on Instagram of, I think it was like 4 or 5 girls out in front of Tower Records in Union Square from like 1994. And some
Awesome.
MTV News was like, here are the CDs that are coming out. Like, what do you want to, like, what are you going to get? And it was like, you know, a young guy
You're gonna
wearing
make me cry. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
like a Patriots hat, and kind of goes by and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna get he's like, I'm gonna get Pearl Jam. Yeah, Vitology, I'll be there for that. And it's like they're all talking about like the new Madonna album and Pearl Jam. And the comments, of course, it's boomer bait. Like, look, no phones there. Look at
Right.
how engaged they are. And I gotta say, they weren't totally wrong, because there is a way that young people talk that I think is like replicated through phones, and the way
Mhm.
that people respond to things. It's like a lingua franca of youth.
Sure.
But a lot of that is based on almost the cadence that TikToks now have in some ways. Like this, like it's like a downbeat. First we had the blah blah, then we had there's like a downbeat in the way that people
Jalen
edit.
Brunson goes in for the layup.
Exactly. But you know what I mean though? Like the
Yeah, of
TikTok
course.
voice, there's a cadence
Automated
that
voice.
starts
Yeah.
it starts, but it's even with people now sort of record their own TikToks
Mm.
with the TikTok cadence. And again, it's just the way that people talk is different. If you go back to the 1930s and it's something like, see, Michael Jordan's the best ever, see? But
Here's a shiny
just
penny
people
for you,
talk
kid.
different.
Yeah.
And there was a specific voice from the 1970s in the way that people spoke. And
For
I
sure.
do think that now enough time has elapsed since the 90s and 80s where you'll see people outside of a movie theater, they're going to see Star Wars, and people actually talk differently than they do now.
For sure. For sure.
It's just a long time has passed. But watching them, I was like, they do seem smarter and more engaged. Like, it's just the tonality felt so much more adult because, of course, we're old.
Well,
Even though they were teenagers,
Yeah.
the way they talk feels like an adult, if that makes sense. Like, they all remind me of Caitlin Phillips.
Yeah, right. Shout out to Caitlin Phillips. As an old head, I was there on Broadway at that Tower Records, lining up for the end of it was like Blink 182. I think I lined up for Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. We would all wait for records to drop at midnight, so we'd have them, and go down the street to St. Mark's beforehand to see if anyone had them used or promos of it for a little bit of a discount and early access. And I remember old heads walking by us being like, "You kids touch grass, kids." Like back in the day, we didn't have compact discs. We listened it together live at CBGB's. Like now you guys like go into your cars and listen to them digitally, and like uh the warmth is gone from this whole scene. Like you're at Tower Records. Before Tower Records was a protagonist, it was the enemy. That's why other music existed. It's just like, look at you lining up for this corporate greed, paying Atlantic Records $20 for a double CD. It's like, it's not like what it used to be when I was hanging out with Dee Dee Ramone up the street.
When I was screaming Judas at Bob Dylan, there was no
Yeah.
CDs around.
I mean, grievance, as we always say, is part of everything, and I love it, and it's fun. But the level of grievance now, I feel like people are too good at arguing. You're talking about language changing. We're all in debate club talking about teachers' pets. Like we all know how to rebut each other's takes. It's like, well, on the other hand, and in a way, social media is flipping someone off in a moving car or on a bike. It's like, well, I don't have to deal with the response because I could just block them, and I'll get my take off. I'll jump this turnstile, and it'll be a W for me because I have had, humiliations throughout my day, whether that be someone winning an argument or stepping in dog shit on Broadway. Spending $25 for a double CD that's should be kind of one classic CD, if you want to be honest.
I think there's a, like, beyond the indignities of life, as you're describing.
Sure.
that,
I like to say
and we talk about
humiliations.
the humiliations, sure, the mortifications
indignities,
of
right.
existence.
Yeah.
And we talk about the economy of grievance on basically every episode. As the authors of The Joy of Basketball, we talk a lot about the economy of grievance. I think it's going back a little bit to what I was saying about the sort of mimicry in the way that people communicate with each other, whether it's the tonality or the points that are made. There is this sort of homogenization of takes. And this applies to basketball. It applies to complaints about the subway system or congestion parking or politics, whatever. It's like the regurgitation almost turns everyone into a bot in some ways.
It's incredible. Not to get too stony, simulation theory, right? It's incredible. But what you're saying is like it's deflating, but then afterwards it becomes really exciting. And go on, I interrupted you because I was excited.
Well, I was thinking again, not to jump the gun on basketball, but a lot of these ideas about the problems with the modern game, you'd see them go viral. You'd see them in the comments, and then they'd be in IRL, and someone would say to you like, "Well, no one's running, offenses anymore." I'm like, "Wait, but you just saw the Kobe thing. I saw that too, right? And everybody saw it, and now you're just saying it." So it's turning a viral clip into a real life conversation. This is happening with everything. And especially when you think about like bot farms that are paid for by whether it's a Democratic Party or the Republican Party or the IDF or whoever is behind Elon Musk, whatever. It's like, welcome to de Blasio's New York. Welcome to blue states. Welcome to this. I'm like, is that a person or a bot? I can't even tell anymore. And then you see, your guy Zuck introducing like bot profiles to interact with people, but who have these sort of written out identities. I'm like, why do we need bots on Facebook and Instagram to interact with real humans? What's the purpose here?
The internet reset everything because in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, everyone was onto advertising and corporations, right? It was just like, oh, they're kind of just lying to us. I guess like I wasn't alive. I'm not that old, but in the 40s and 50s, it's like, oh, Coca-Cola will make you stronger and it's good for your digestion. And the skepticism kind of creeps in with the hippies who let us down eventually, and the 70s and 80s, and counterculture exists, and we are weary of the trappings of big business. And then the internet comes and it resets everything, where everyone's like, okay, everything's new. There's a new format in which to interact. There's a new format in which to process your thoughts. And you know what? Maybe Coca-Cola does help my digestion. It's like, oh, goddamn. Okay, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? And what you're talking about is totally true. And it's advertising, right? It is someone telling you Impossible Meat is an ethical way to live your life moving forward. Please purchase this thing. And it takes a longer time than I would think for an equal and opposite reaction. Because there's excitement,
Yeah,
the IPO thing.
Right. I don't know. There is, as you said, there's something simulation theory about it where, generally speaking, your interactions with someone online are kind of no different from what it would be with a bot. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
I'm not
mean,
mad about it. Yeah.
I don't mean 100%, but for the like those sort of temporary, fragile, meaningless interactions where someone says, "I agree with that," or someone says, "That's bullshit," and presents one side of an argument. That's kind of how you would interact with a stranger anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a bit jarring. And I do think when there are political subjects, I can't tell you who's a bot and who's not. Which are accounts that are just there trying to chew up your time and make it look as if this is an unpopular opinion. Or, I mean, there was a story about Democratic, I believe it was like Democratic candidates, people who were, I want to say were like, anti-war, and bots were just flooding their comments every time they would post, just arguing. Now, are those AI bots? Are they bots that are controlled by bot farms with a bunch of people all doing it
Created
and
by
copy
humans?
pasting?
Sure.
I don't even know, man. I couldn't tell you how that works.
I mean, is a computer that generates an image less beautiful than a painter painting it with their hands? Like, that's a debate we're gonna have to deal with. Like, I think lost in the ratings conversation about the NBA, which has been debunked, is video games. And there is excitement for the NBA. There's excitement for players, but a lot of young people have, in the last 20 years, experienced that through a simulation that they control. Is watching someone play a video game different than watching a stream of an actual game? It is, and it isn't, depending on how loose your brain wants to go.
I've seen some nostalgia or like early 2000s 2K stuff, like basketball wise. Like, oh man, this was as good as it got. And there's something about the lack of uncanny valley with some of those games where the sort of primitive versions of, LeBron James at 23 or Allen Iverson are a lot more appealing than even today's game.
For us, yeah.
So I'm saying there's clearly a nostalgic element to it,
Yeah.
but I think that's kind of what we're approaching in a lot of ways, right? Is like and think about how AI has like developed so quickly when it comes to art. It like the first images that it was doing were hilarious because it was these demented, twisted, gruesome images where you're like, hey, let's
Will Smith,
Eric Adams' head inside of an olive jar, and it's like so gross and fucked up that it kind of was artistic.
Yeah.
And then as it becomes more and more real, it becomes far less interesting. And then it's like, okay, so this is a viral clip of a dog helping someone put out a fire. And you're like, no, it's just AI. What are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, I remember Photoshop was a big deal. There's not to get too dorky, but there was like an amazing movement, an art movement called the Pictures Generation, right? Like Richard Prince, Cindy Sherman, and they would argue that like the authorship over images is up for debate, and it is kind of a free for all. This was before Adobe showed up with their technology. So Cindy Sherman's most famous work is the movie stills, where she puts on costumes like femme fatales or characters in movies and shoots them in a Hitchcockian way. And Richard Prince famously just takes someone else's photo and puts his name underneath it, signs it, his own signature, and it becomes his. And that is a debate. Legally, at bars, no one's really on the same page as each other here because it kind of complicated. I think their statement was so predictive, but it didn't take into account that we would have an explosion that was the internet and technology. And it's to your point, it's funny people arguing about the authenticity of a dog doing a funny thing on their X feed and then them retweeting someone else or stealing a joke or hearing a funny gag on Instagram and then bringing it over and people are like, that's not your joke. You lifted that from somewhere else. It's like, yeah, but I put my own spin on it. I'm like, everyone's an artist at this point.
You referenced raw dogging life earlier a little bit.
I think about this all the time.
And there's been I would not say it's a large trend, but a well-covered trend that was about traveling while raw dogging. Just raw dogging a flight, staring at the map, no headphones, no food, just no entertainment system, no movies, just staring at the map, stoic as you go through a 7-hour flight and then you land in Amsterdam after just, basically staring into space, alone with your thoughts, pondering your mortality and so forth.
Or not.
Or just having a blank fucking mind.
Chilling. Yeah, I don't know. Being chill. Well, I think about wait.
Well, I was going to say, like, we don't need to talk specifically about raw dogging travel because that's not new and we've already thought about that. We've probably talked about it. I forget. But just the idea overall of just raw dogging stuff.
Well, like, I thought about it in terms of sports, right? And like, now that I have kids, like, I'm not really interested in them getting into sports. I think it has been a blessing onto my life, but not the blessing I want for my children. And my kid caught a glimpse of an NFL game this weekend, And he was like, "What's this? This seems interesting to me. These are colors. These are men doing funny things. These are interesting. There's numbers on each one of these men. It's amazing. That's number 14. That's number 2. That's number 0." He was like popping off. And I was like, that's cool. Whatever. He can watch a little bit of this. And I was thinking about, I always think about raw dogging because like in studio is a painting better when there's no music or there's no podcasts or there's no one else in the room. When people want to come over, I'm like, cannot do that. I need to raw dog this work because the object of personally of making a picture to me is to get to some sort of truth. And the truth rarely lies in cacophony, right? Sometimes it does. Maximalism is an awesome idea. But I think I don't know about like transcending anything, but like I was thinking I've been gambling on the NBA since the 90s with fantasy. I've never raw dogged a game. Like if the NFL is such a great product, why do we need chicken wings and mapo tofu and garbage plates and hot dogs and weenies and blankets and 7-layer burritos and loaded fries and 7-bean nachos and soup and all these things, right? Like,
Why is there a loaded fry district? We know it's just for football.
why can't I just get fries? How come I have to go to Cleveland and you just want to put shit on my fries? Can I just have a plate without the garbage?
Not in the loaded fry district, you can't.
No, watch. But like the raw dogging thing is interesting, right? Because like I don't raw dog anything. I have my computer on. I have my phone. I'm in the middle of 2 conversations on my phone.
Well, you got a couple of kids, buddy.
I mean, it's insane. Like, how many conversations do you have going on right now on your phone? Like, after we are done making this perfect pod, you can pick up a conversation and be like, oh, I'll add a joke to this.
Some, for
right?
sure.
I mean, I'm there with you.
Well, look, I don't know, no sin bin. I don't really want to get into too much NFL talk. I tried to watch a little yesterday, and I'm agreeing with your statement because I wasn't eating, I wasn't drinking. I just threw on a football game.
You raw dog a game.
No, I was like, I need to be on my phone. There's 45 seconds between every play.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a deeply uneventful sport. And this is not me disputing its wild popularity and the reasons that people like it so much. And part of it may be because it's every 45 seconds something happens. That like once a minute, you get something. It's not continuous. And I was just kind of watching again. I'm not even here to like shit on football. I was just, as I was saying, I had to be on my phone. I would watch it, and then I'd look back and I'd scroll or I'd send a message to somebody like, oh, looks like they're at the line of scrimmage again. 3-yard run, nice. And then I go back to my phone. Ooh, false start, sick.
I'm getting way too stony on this episode, but like with football, I'm convinced the game is a bad product. It's just a bad game. There's too many stoppages. There's too many commercials. There's not enough things that happen. Obviously, some games are better than others, but generally speaking, a football game sucks. But our addiction to the NFL is our addiction to sugar. What are we going to get to eat? Let's get a pizza. It's like, you want to eat something healthy? Like, no, football's on, man. I want my nachos. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a cheat day, you know? It's like, oh, I want to go on my phone and like see if my fantasy team did good and I have some parlays going on. What's going on with the other games? I'm like, you're addicted
we need
to gambling.
9 beers because football's on. Oh,
right. It's a
football's on.
Commercial. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we should get 9 beers, 6 pizzas, and 7 loaded fries, and then we should hit these parlays because football's on TV.
Yeah. Oh, come over and watch the game. It's like, I'll bring a case of beer. And I'm like, the overall experience is amazing. I'm co-signing for all of these things. These are very fun things to do with your friends and family. The NFL itself sucks.
What are you going to do for the game? Oh, I'm going to watch it by myself on the couch and raw dog it. Like, no. Come to my house. I'm installing a kegerator in the garage. Right. Come to the man cave, and we're like one crash out away from locking in.
Right. Yeah, right. If we get bored with that, we can play cards. We can play poker. I have a poker table right here. How much money are you going to put down? It's incredible, and a lot of things are this way. And I'm not even being like a hater on these wonderful vices, but in this cultural debate about NFL and NBA, the NFL sucks, man. There's not many stars. Quarterbacks are like 1 in 10 are interesting. It's hard to follow. The angle of the TV doesn't show you the whole field. The thing sucks.
Yeah, and again, the economy of grievance. NFL's riding high. No one's complaining about the current product.
I'm trying
The
to hate on
NBA,
that. Yeah.
the NBA is so good. There's so many good games. The talent level is just preposterously high. There's so many fun players. There's so much parity, and it's like this game sucks. Let's turn on the old
No.
pigskin and add an eighth layer to this nacho dip.
Like I looked at the mock and NFL draft coming up. It's some bullshit, man. It's always some Trevor Lawrence is a bust. Like this is no fun. Um and like the thing that I feel like so I've been trying to get my life in order. I'm trying to like
Thank
reboot
God.
my life. Thank you. The right. Sleeping more, drinking less, all etc. etc. Vegetables, whatever. I stopped watching the NFL because I felt like it was, not to use a millennial word, it was a toxic element in my life. When I hear the dun dun dun, dun I'm like, oh, it just makes me feel bad. Now,
That's legitimately why I stopped watching it a long time ago. You know what? I don't need this weird, violent, patriotic thing
yeah,
occurring that also requires me get violently drunk
yeah, and
and
violently
ingest
full of hot
30,000
dogs. Yeah.
and just 30,000 calories on a Sunday.
And violently rich, taking money away from unsuspecting fantasy participators. But like,
These poor souls in Vegas that I'm
yeah.
bleeding dry with all of my parlay victories.
Yeah. And like sports is the worst part of my best friends, right? I mean, we do a sports podcast. I love this. But like my friends who I love, as soon as they talk about sports, half of my friends are like, "Oh, brother, here we go." It's just like, well, the Redskins, now the Commanders, like they got a quarterback, and like, did you see the last game? And I'm like, I don't know if a conversation about the Pictures generation and Richard Prince is that much better, but it feels better because it talks about like weird life things. With sports, I felt the same way about video games. I was addicted to video games once. I was timing myself beating like Sonic the Hedgehog with a stopwatch. And I was like, yeah, this isn't doing, unless I become like a professional video game player, this isn't doing much for me. And with football, I was like, is winning a couple $1,000s off of my friends in fantasy like worth it? Kinda. That's money. But like football and the violent aspect of it, and I was interested in the Kaepernick stuff. That was cool. I like when Kyrie kind of stirs the pot in the NBA. These are all interesting things that bring me back. But in general, God, my life is better without the dun 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 dun. Dun.
What's the current version of the Quo speedrun?
What do you mean?
Like the rush that you got from finishing a video game in a new fastest time. Is that now like a Mapo Tofu thing? Like, can you knock this Mapo Tofu out in 15 minutes, start to finish? You got the simmering pot of boiling, like
Do I have that Mambo
salted
Mapo
water
mentality?
You've got your stuff minced here. Like, what's the new speed run?
You know, I've been making a master Mapo sauce. I make it in batches for the whole week, so I just have to lop it off into a wok, and it takes, even in the microwave, it takes minutes.
So this is the new speed run.
Not the new speed run. I would say the new speed run is how to live your New York City life with the least amount of bullshit. That's a new speed run. It's like, can I avoid SantaCon? Now I'm kind of pro SantaCon. Can I avoid people arguing about congestion pricing? How do I get a drink in a place with no immigrants.
My new speedrun is paying $9 to get into the city.
That's what I'm saying, right? So you're trying to beat Sonic for the 50th time, like I was trying to do. It was insane.
This idea of ambient viewing is very much in the zeitgeist. I think Netflix kind of put out a dictum or whatever, like a directive that we're looking for
Raw
more
dogging,
programming.
dictum. What kind of show are we doing, man? Tony
And you know how-
Kukoc. This is crazy.
You know how it gets. It's a raw dogging episode.
Yeah.
But then they said they want shows that people can follow while they're on their phones. TV that is solely background, and that of course is like very antithetical to the way that people would propose making television and movies, and it, like the Scorsese idea of like, wait, hold on, you're saying we're going to basically have characters just repeatedly say things over and over and over instead of implying them so that people, when they glance up or they hear it, they'll know what's going on and they can follow this plot with no subtlety because they're only half watching to begin with. I would also say that's been the case for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, when I listen to ambient music, I have a whistle, like a referee whistle. And as soon as I hear like a little beat or like a little sample that brings it out of its ambience, I blow it like beep. Selected ambient works should just be selected works at this point. That's not an ambient record. I can't do other stuff. All of a sudden I'm dancing. This isn't passive music, right? Is Netflix just trying to make podcasts now? Is that what they're doing?
Sort of. I mean, I'm trying to think what I would view as very ambient watching to me would be Forensic Files.
True crime stuff.
Yeah, true crime. For me, Forensic Files, because it's kind of a podcast ASMR. It's that guy with this creepy voice.
Yeah,
being like, and then she went to the sun. It's just like you just hearing his weird, creepy voice.
Yep.
You know, someone dies at the beginning, and they're going to tell you who did it at the end, and the rest is just like. And then the vehicle, they discovered a single human hair. You're like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. At the end, you're just going to say who did this. Great. It's 22 minutes.
The reverse is interesting, right? Like I always say, like one of the greatest American artworks ever is This American Life. Jesus, I love that show. But they tried to make it into a thing you can watch, right? And I think they tried for a few episodes, being like, we're going to bring these audible experiences into a visual world where you're more captive, where you can like raw dog this thing, you know? And it didn't quite work because I think there's a certain level, like I don't love music videos because there's a certain level of looseness a sound has that floats in the air. And Netflix knows this. Like they took 2-hour movies and made them 12 hours, right? And into different episodes. And nonfiction is great because documentaries, because it doesn't rely too heavily on visuals unless you're a master like Errol Morris or something. And then you have the beautiful Philip Glass shit. It's amazing. But a lot of YouTubers have already figured this out, this passive experience where it's like, hey, I'm just going to walk around New York City for 2 hours. Come with me. And it's no narration. It's just sounds.
They should probably consider touching Philip Glass.
Yeah. Breaking that Philip Glass. Oh my God. This is an amazing aside. My friend lives in the same building as an archivist, and they throw a lot of good shit away. And he has to go through the garbage to see if he's thrown anything good away. And he found correspondence with Philip Glass and like letters going back and forth, mostly received, and scandalous stuff. Like, I don't know, just like very scandalous stuff that would like blow the socks off the Philip Glass biography. Turns out it's another Philip Glass, not the one that created that beautiful music, but Phil Glass, who lives down the street. They call him.
So anyway, if you know Phil Glass, he's
P.
been up to some shit.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is Playoff P. This is not the wonderful composer. But yo, I want to jump around. I know this is not the run of show, but like this Netflix move towards maybe ambient listening podcasting. Your boy Playoff P, not the composer, had a quote that I don't even feel like is true, but like it showed up on my feed and it was like, podcasting is harder than hooping. Made people angry.
Well, I would say not knowing whether this quote is true or not.
It seemed so out of nowhere. I mean, he does have a podcast for sure.
I would say for Paul George, that's probably true because he's been playing basketball on an incredible level for his entire life. So when people say it's harder to like podcast, well, he's like, yeah, he's not a podcaster. To me, that just seems like a totally reasonable suggestion for someone who is a pro basketball player for them to say, not that it's easier for him to become a podcaster or an NBA player, but the act itself, well, he's a great basketball player. He's a Hall of Famer. Yeah, that's easy for him. Recording a perfect pod, well, now that's a different animal altogether. Animal.
We got two here.
Animal, Andrew.
I thought it was ridiculous, and people were like, another example why Paul George is the worst. And then I got my Chinese hat on, I got my calculator, my abacus, and I started thinking about it. And I'm like, there's probably less than 20, less than 15, 10 great podcasters on Earth. And I know it's an American bias, and there may be some great podcaster in Taipei that I don't know about. But I would say Paul George is not only right, this is not even a debate. Yeah, podcasting is harder than playing basketball because if we're just going to say there's one baller in every YMCA, there's one baller in every college campus. There's hundreds of ballers in the NBA. Are there 30 great
Are there
podcasters?
450 phenomenal podcasters out there?
I can count 6 or 7, like really good, and they're not even my favorite.
I once did the math on how many D1 teams there are. I forget what it is now, but let's say whatever. Let's say there's 300.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be that, but whatever. Mm-hmm. Each of those teams has probably 12 guys who are wonderful basketball players, high school stars, athletic specimens, hyper skilled, super tall, all these attributes. It's Division I basketball. It's the highest level of collegiate ball. They're getting people from across the world. They're getting international talent. You go to D2. Sorry, those guys can hoop.
Yeah, man.
D2 guys are nice. They're fucking good. I mean, we were in a Nike league years ago. The guy who won MVP twice, D2 guy. Mm-hmm. We won a title with him and a D3 guy. And they're nice. They're nice. Knockdown jumpers, hitting threes, playing defense, hyper skilled. They weren't 6'9", but they were really good at basketball. Yeah. There's no way you have thousands of good podcasters out there.
No. And like, what does it mean, right? Is it popularity? You know, there's always like, is a painting good if it doesn't sell? Sure, we can take that into account. But even that, I'm like, if you look at the Apple iTunes podcasting top 10, like, is Michael Barbaro a good podcaster, or is it just the news? Like, I'm not a Joe Rogan guy, but like, he's one of them. Bill Simmons is the god, right? He's one of them. Stugotz, you know, and then I kind of Jeff Teague. Then it kind of gets kind of more difficult, and I'm like, there's many more ballers in that. And if podcasting is as popular as basketball becomes, like, maybe we can talk about that. But in 2025, Paul George is, if he actually said it, is totally correct, because he is not a good podcaster.
I would also say that outside of this mathematical breakdown of ballers versus podcasters, as far as for someone like Paul George, if you said, okay, you're going to learn to do card tricks, he'd be like, this is so much more difficult than playing basketball. Like, I'm here trying to,
Michael
do
Jordan.
this kind of cut cards. What
Yeah.
am I doing? I'm dropping cards on the ground. This is like a zillion times harder than playing basketball.
Atlantic City. Here's Michael Jordan's coming in. They're like, yes, please. Anything you want, Mr. Jordan. Here's your chips. Yes, please come into our casino because he's not good at gambling.
Steph Curry, draw a cartoon of Bart Simpson from memory. Like, oh, I can't do it. This is so much harder than basketball. It's impossible. Can't do it.
But yeah, it's like
Make Mapo Tofu speedrun style. Like, oh, put me back on the court. I give up.
make a master Mapua batch. I dare you. It's like, oh, I had
Can it
easier
be
time
martinis?
360 dunking on fools. Yeah. But Paul George is, gosh, if there was ever a bad nickname, it's Playoff P, because eventually Father Time catches up with nightlife and small forwards in the NBA. Don't cry. Don't cry. Paul George has a Hall of Fame career.
So Paul George, first year of his grand contract with the Sixers, he's not played particularly well.
He looks terrible.
And I mean, his defense, solid. I think he's been, as far as his passing, his defense, his rebounding, those are all pretty standard.
He's
they're
not
fine.
moving fast. He's not
fine.
twitchy anymore, right?
They're fine. He just can't score like he used to. I mean, he was a player who in his prime was always a volume efficient scorer. He was a guy who could give you 25 a game, close to, high 50s, low 60s, true shooting percentage. Valuable, very valuable player, really well-rounded.
Showtime. Dunks. Oh my gosh.
The guy just can't get to the rim at this point. He doesn't go to the foul line as a consequence of that. And his jumper has betrayed him a bit. A lot of fall-away jumpers from 18 feet. He's shot poorly from three, despite being a very good three-point shooter, which is, I would say, in part a consequence of the Sixers' wretched offense overall that may not be indicative of his actual shooting skill. But yeah, Paul George is a hyper-inefficient, moderate-level scorer who's getting trucked by Banchero and jammed on.
Banchero's huge.
We got three more years of this, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you never want to pass up an opportunity to add a player like Paul George, but you also know he could just fall off of a cliff because of his age and his injury. And you kind of take that risk, right? I think you rewind to this offseason, you do it all over again. Add Paul George. This is the build. I think Morey had been looking at Paul George for years, lining up the timelines, being like, hey, if there was another superstar available, I would take him. But it's Paul George, so we're going to go.
Yeah, I think if you were going to give a rundown of how Daryl Morey has performed as the Sixers GM, you can say he's been successful in executing plans, right? You could say, turn Ben Simmons into James Harden, turn James Harden into Paul George. Like, that was the plan.
That's the plan.
And he got it done.
Right.
Were those the right moves to make? Was that the right trade? Should he have done this? Should he have signed this guy? Those are more debatable. I think I respect that he had a plan and got it done. Was it the best course of action? I don't know. Does that make sense?
No.
Like,
in hindsight, right? No.
Well,
It's
right,
like, was that draft pick a bust? It's like, but he was the best. Kevin Knox was the right pick.
Right. So I'm looking at it and like, did it make sense from a strategic standpoint to let Tobias Harris's contract go to its bitter end, use that money, sign Paul George, basically have nothing left on the roster? Did he accomplish that? Yes. Was it the right move? Dunno.
Because also, right, to that point, Joel Embiid kind of suffers a cataclysmic injury after cataclysmic injury. And like the pieces, the foundation of the house cannot support the renovation.
Right. And when people ask me on Twitter, what do you think the Sixers should do? Well, if Joel Embiid isn't healthy, which he is not, he's missed 2/3 of the games, he's looked hobbled when he's on the court, well, then there is no plan anymore. And you could
Right.
come up with a different plan, but it's not the same plan. The plan was use draft assets that you've accumulated mostly from the Harden trade. You've got some guys under contract that are there to be moved, and you go and you find a couple other key spots. You burn those assets, and that was supposed to fill out the rest of this roster by the time that the deadline came around. At this point, I'm like, you might just want to keep your powder dry. You know, this was not a 1 year plan. And we can say, yeah, it didn't work out for year one. Let's see what happens next year. Bring it back with Joel Embiid and Maxey and Paul George and use your assets and try to add some guys. I just feel like we knew this was a 4-year plan when they signed these guys to these extensions. And maybe year one, you just write off. Hey, we don't need to go all in. We failed year one. It didn't work out. It doesn't work out for most teams. Like, just accept that Joel's health ruined plan A. So maybe there isn't an immediate fix to plan B on January 15th or on February 10th, whenever the trade deadline is. Maybe the fix is over the offseason.
I don't want to be a draft centrist, but the Sixers pick certain stands right now at number 8, and that's going to go to Oklahoma City. Those thrift lords at Oklahoma City. That sucks, right? Like, so losing games at this point probably doesn't get you into a safe place in the top of the draft. But the centrist part comes in, like, according to Tankathon, in that zone, you got a point guard from Illinois, Nolan Traore, Trey Johnson, Newpol. These guys might turn out to be awesome. And the Sixers are good at drafting. But there's no, like, clear, like, savior that it will bless the Sixers in the draft, right? Especially since they have to convey it to another team. So, like, the rebuild is tough because a lot of teams are trying to do what the Sixers are doing, would try to do, to your point, but have started already. And, like, the Sixers would have to start today.
Right. Well, right. I was going to say, I don't think the Sixers should be thinking about rebuilding right now. I think it's more like, yeah, can you say, okay, all right, this didn't work out for the first 3 months of our plan. We need to immediately get rid of Paul George and Joel Embiid, and we need to tank, and we like.
No. You wait on Joel for sure.
Okay. Just hold on. Well, it's okay. You can see what you can take a look see and figure out a best course of action later on. I do think that Philly is likely they're in a spot where, yeah, it's tough to know what they should do, because I was looking at their schedule, and this was the easy stretch, and they went and they just had humiliating, mortifying losses. I did think Joel was going to be playing more, and he just has not been available. But, you know, they went and lost to the Kings. They went and lost to Orlando. They lost to the Pelicans. Like, this was supposed to be the stretch where they got up to 500 and were in, like, that 10th spot ahead of the Bulls, creeping up on the Hawks and these other teams around 500. Because what Philly has coming forward, they got OKC, Knicks, Nuggets, Bucks, Celtics.
It brings joy to my ears hearing the Knicks are part of a tough schedule. That's crazy. They're good.
I'm saying Philly is not going to gain any ground over the next 2 weeks. Let's just leave it at that.
If I could put on my Bing Bong troll mask
Mm-hmm.
to replace my mathlete mask, haha, right? Because, like, I thought the Sixers fans did Ben Simmons so bad. And that was the best Sixers team with Joel Embiid we'll ever see. That Ben Simmons squad, man. Ben Simmons was the point guard for the height of Joel Embiid's career.
I mean, look, without even going into ancient history, that the Simmons, Butler, Embiid team, that's like my favorite Sixers team in history. It was so obvious that was the trio to keep together. There was no reason to have Tobias there. Like, whatever, you can find on my old tweets or issues of the pod. I said that a million times.
It's in print.
Those three are going to win a title together if you can keep them with a couple shooters, they're good to go.
Hmm.
That's all you need. A couple shooters. This team is way too good on defense. They're way too smart. They're too creative. They're nasty. They're mean. They're physical. That team was going to win titles, and they blew it apart.
For Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris over me. Yeah,
Pistons
like,
legend Tobias Harris.
right. I mean, I kind of want to start talking about some good teams.
Yeah. We're done with the Sixers.
Yeah.
Also, Jared McCain out for the year. Okay, move on.
Yeah. But, I do want to live in the past still, talking about Ben Simmons, because two top 10 NBA players, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams, were seen at our buddy's vintage shop. Incredible. Are they on a cultural delay or are they ahead of the curve? You don't see many vintage demons out there anymore.
I know they were also at the Real Real.
Mm-hmm.
SGA, I don't know. Chet was there with J Dub also.
J Dub is a fit god. He enjoys the culture.
So that was before they played the Knicks, and then they remained in the city after. And I think they went by Procel yesterday, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know when it coincided with them posting it, but they weren't in town for long. They destroyed
I'm saying
the
they played on Friday, so they were at the Real Real on like Thursday, and then shopping, and then they played the game, and then they were either at Procel on Friday or Sunday, or I'm sorry, Saturday or Sunday, over the weekend. Yeah,
They were like, look at these streets, so empty, so usable. We could just jaywalk.
Let's get our city bikes, ride around.
But it was awesome to see a team full of young guys that demolished the Knicks. That made me pause because I was like, the Knicks have a lot of work to do. But it was cool of them. It was cool to see them kind of like walking these streets and like checking stuff out on such a granular level.
So SGA has a reputation as like one of the few NBA guys who actually has style. He clearly cares about it.
Yeah.
I know the throwing fits dudes were talking about, like, yeah, he's kind of like the only one. Maybe there's a few others, but it's mostly just SGA who can actually put on weird clothes and look good. And they were comparing
Balenciaga shit, right?
Yeah, they were comparing him to Ohtani. They're like, we love the fact that Ohtani is dressed like a square because he shouldn't be trying to dress cool because that's not who he is. He should be wearing bad fitting pants and like a dress shirt, and that's great. That's Ohtani. Like, he doesn't need to be out there ricked out.
Yeah, Jaylen Brown should be wearing a leprechaun costume, obviously.
Exactly. So SGA went by Procel, and I think they've been going there for a while. There's also that spot on Canal that has jewelry, and they've had a photo up of SGA at that spot for years.
Right. Oh, right next to Happier Grocers, right?
Yeah, he's a boutique guy.
I know. Have you ever seen him out like after 10 p.m.? I mean, he's recent, right? Like, he's not One Oak. He's too young for One Oak.
Not out in New York. I would guess that he's been at, like Paris Fashion Week parties or something. Like, maybe he's been to like the Met Gala, things like that.
I think both of those things are true. Is he a villain? I feel like he's taken over MVP discussions. And I think people have enough Jokic big man fatigue to embrace a guard. That sounds fun. But where does he fall in the NBA's like story? Is he a villain or like a protagonist?
I think he's a protagonist, but he might be better served as a villain.
Yeah, he's kind of salty, right?
He's kind of salty. He also embarrasses people.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, he's an and one dude. He's kind of surly. People don't like the way he foul baits, whatever. People don't like the way he pushes off. Like, I feel like the discussion around him doesn't have the joy that the Anthony Edwards discussion had last year. People are like, SJ is so good and undeniable. But look, he's pushing off. He's wearing a bra. He's like the worst dude. All this stuff.
I think it's just that he's Canadian.
Whoa. But Canada's going to be annexed and be a
That's
part
true.
of America in the next few months.
Who's the GOAT Greenland hooper?
They
Danny
have
Green?
Jeff Green, Draymond Green.
It might be Draymond.
Is he the best Green of all time? Yeah. Yes.
Who's the insane dunker?
Dunker? Oh my gosh. Yes. The guy who. Nah. Why is this happening? Only if we had Google.
Yeah,
The
who
Boston
are
Celtic great. Jeff
yeah.
Green, Jalen Green,
Oh, Gerald Green. Yeah,
Jeremy Green,
Gerald.
um, Mehmet Green. Is that it?
The Met Green.
Yeah, Joe
yeah,
Green, best dunker ever. Yeah, I mean, that Greenland. We'll save Greenland for another episode. But
I gotta say, Gerald Green, he doesn't feel like a Gerald. He feels like a Green, but not a Gerald. Hey, what's up? This is my friend Gerald. I mean, I know Jerry Green doesn't quite work, but I don't look at him and think Gerald. I think Green.
Peja Green, Gileon Green, what were Manu Green?
Dirk Green.
Yeah. What if he was Land Green? The Land. What if he played for the Cavaliers?
I think it
Give
works
him
out.
the Land. If a Green ends up, well, I guess Jeff Green was a Cavalier. This is de-evolving into a not the perfect pod, but
We're gonna save it, and then it all comes back to Danny Green, who came up with Cleveland.
Mhm.
He turned that place into Greenland.
Yeah. For its natural resources and military locations.
And they're 3-and-D wings.
Yes, Buffalo Wings. The
Andrew,
MVP.
you have to get back on track. We have to save this pod. We've got like half an hour.
The MVP rankings has looked different this year than the last 5 years, right? Because SGA has taken number one on the ladder on NBA.com, but Wemby has leaped over Tatum, like the world's most influential basketball podcast predicted weeks ago. There is a shifting of the guard, even post LeBron. If Jokic occupied that space with Doncic, now we're getting another wave of players. We discussed this on Twitter. You're right. If you're a top 5 player, if your story fits, you're a viable MVP candidate. I think it has to be Jokic. He's unbelievable. Jokic is the most valuable player in basketball who will not get this award. And forgive me for jumping too far ahead, but as we're seeing the white flag sitting there dominating college basketball right now, I'm like, we're about to step into like a thrilling era of the NBA.
I was thinking about a similar idea the other day, and it was about Cooper Flag. And I was like, early on, he struggled. He's played a lot better in conference play. Like, you know what's cool is like we're gonna find out. You know how with like boxing, if you were a fan, you may never get that matchup
Frustrating.
between these
Mayweather
two
never
great
fought
fighters.
anyone good. Right.
You just don't get it. Like, oh, I want to see that. Sorry, you don't. Or maybe you'll see it in 3 years. No, I guess we're not.
But you don't want it, right?
I heard they're making
Because
this
Tyson
movie.
gets knocked out. Right.
It's like, oh, they're gonna make Sicario 3? Trace Sicarios? Like, hell yeah. I'm like, maybe they're not. I don't know. Like, come on.
Guys, the Phantom Menace. Star Wars is back, baby. How could this go wrong?
But we're gonna see Cooper Flag in the NBA in a year. It's gonna happen.
It makes me feel sad because time flies, right? I remember watching Zion Williamson in high school and being like, the Knicks suck. What if he ended up in New York? And he almost did, right? And now he's older and broken. And I'm like, this goes too fast. And this dovetails into like, if I spend too much time not raw dogging the NBA, then I'm just a part of grievance culture and I'm going to miss all this good shit.
I agree. And I don't know, I've been watching, this is a product of League Pass. It's like whatever's the late game from the West Coast. You're like, all right, I'll throw it on.
You've
Been
never
watching way
logged
too
into
much.
Stream East. You never
But
logged onto a Russian website.
who would ever do that?
No, never. Not me. I'm paying my tolls.
So, I'm like, all right, I guess the only game on is the Blazers. Seemed
The
like a
blazing
lot
is
of
insane. The blazing is
the
insane.
Blazing. I've watched so much Blazers basketball over the last month. They
I like
aren't
Kamara.
good.
I like Kamara.
Yeah,
He's
no,
cool.
he can play. They aren't good. They have some sort of interesting guys, but they're just a bad team. They're still tanking. They have no real interest in winning. Late in games, when it's crunch time, they'll put all the young guys out there to make sure that they lose. Like, yeah, they are deeply unpalatable. But I've kind of been enjoying like the routine of like, oh, god damn, here come the Blazers again. Time for me to watch my dosage of the Blazers.
That team to me is melancholy because of Anthony Simon. Because we've heard for years in practice, this kid is incredible. Like, we need to find a way to get him minutes because, like, in practice, he's like hitting every shot, he's making all the switches. Like, we have a low key star on our build around Simons. And time goes by so fast that now it's just like, all right, to your point, we've seen him run the show. He could be had for a bunch of second round picks if you want to take his contract that we gave him. Like, a team can use him as a backup. I'm like, he was like the secret weapon for much of the anticipated rebuild of the Blazers. And he was not glazing, sadly.
And then it's like that gets transferred over to Shaden Sharp. And now we've seen kind of enough
Scoot
of him.
Henderson.
And good. Shaden Sharp's pretty good. He can score. He can shoot.
I
He's
don't
a
like his
great
game.
athlete.
Yeah.
But he's not.
He can dunk.
He can dunk his ass off. But he's also not the one either.
Nope.
And
like, yeah.
Well, this is where I was kind of getting over to Cooper Flagg, as you brought him up, is that he's the anointed savior right now. He's the one who's you're gonna tank for him, you're gonna get him. And
I call him the Great Blue Hope. Right.
And early on, at Duke, he was hyper inefficient. He didn't look that good. They were saying he was Randall with hops. It's whatever. It was echoing.
I'm still saying that.
mountains.
Look at his sizzle. He is Randall with hops. I mean, that's a good player.
I'm saying, so now he's in conference play, had a big game over the weekend, dropped, I think, 42 points, highest scoring game by a rookie, a freshman ever, something along those lines, whatever the thing was.
Jamming, slamming.
Yeah. He's jamming, he's blocking shots, he's rebounding. Actually, pretty good passer. I think that's like something that I was impressed by from his highlights. Very good lob thrower.
He's supposed to be a generational talent. He's not just Alex Sarr or Riza Shea. He's supposed to be the savior.
So I'm asking you, Andrew, say it now. Is he or is he not a savior?
I feel like
no taking it back ever. This is it.
Yeah. I do think so. But like the feelings I had about LeBron James, I was like, all right, if he stays healthy, this is unfuckwithable. This is like, there's no weakness in this prototype of player. I see him. He is going to, if he stays healthy, he's going to be everything we want. Wemby, I was like, I don't know about the shooting. Wemby looks great. I'm worried about Wemby. He has a lot of games to play, but he is, holy shit. He could be the actual GOAT. Flagg, I'm selling Flagg a little bit. I think he's going to be an all-star over and over and over. I think he's going to be 5, 6, 7 in the MVP rankings. I don't like the shot selection. That could change. I don't like the footwork. He plays with this tenacity that like works against college kids. I'm not sure if he's big enough to have his will forced upon Anthony Davis. But that said, he should be a cornerstone player, not on the level of Luka Doncic, certainly not Wemby. But like he should be a Devin Booker type player.
Is he not exactly the same, but is he Blake Griffin?
I love Blake Griffin. That would be amazing.
I'm saying
that'd be amazing.
Blake Griffin's great. If he stayed
Huge
healthy,
fan.
he'd be a Hall of Fame player. I
He
just
still
mean
might
Blake
be,
Griffin.
right.
Blake Griffin was successful because he could jump out of the gym. He was big. He was super strong.
Chris Paul.
I mean, Chris Paul was a big part of that as well.
Yeah.
My thing with Cooper Flag is he has no wiggle to his game at all.
Oh my gosh. Don't drop the W bomb. He's the
I'm saying it.
great wiggle savior.
He doesn't have wiggle. Julius Randle has wiggle.
What?
He does.
Explain yourself. Does Wiggins have wiggle?
Not really.
Both Wiggins, the wig guy?
To me, when I'm thinking about wiggle, is like it's kind of more for bigs or forwards. You know, 3s, 4s, maybe 5s. Like someone like Naz Reid has fucking wiggle.
Okay.
He's a
Explain yourself. Let the wiggle takes fly.
your wiggle flag fly.
Yeah.
There is a amount of additional movement. There is a ability to shift direction side to side on bigger players. And again, Naz Reid is a good example. He's got handle. He's shifty. And I'm more
Jokic,
talking about
AD.
forwards.
Oh, forwards. Okay.
I mean, Jokic kind of does.
Absolutely.
I mean, like someone like
he's a wiggle lord.
when he posts up, he's not hitting you at the same angle all the time. He's posting one shoulder. He's stepping a different way. He's moving.
You'll
Jokic
end your
absolutely has
season with
wiggle.
a one-footed 3.
Yeah,
For sure.
And I don't mean just creativity. I just mean in like a body motion type of thing. Because Blake Griffin didn't have wiggle. Great player, not much wiggle. He was a blunt object.
Straight line player, right? Like we talk about
Giannis
like,
in that way.
Yeah, Westbrook, one of the greatest all-time guards. He's a straight line player.
Like Giannis is a all-timer. He's in the MVP hunt. I would not say he has a lot of wiggle. He just is incredibly strong and incredibly fast and has really long arms, and he is skilled and he's mobile and he will get around you. He can Euro step, but I wouldn't say it's like wiggle.
A thick
And
wiggle
Flag-
lords are interesting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, dancing bears are also generally wiggly players.
That's Naz Reid. I consider him a dancing bear.
I mean, I would say even a guard with wiggle, again, like Raymond Felton, that was a wiggly ass guard. A little
Legend.
fat guy. A little fat guy, but he had
Positive. A positive.
no shaming, but he had wiggle. Cooper Flag is very straight line from what I've seen. And he can't get to the basket. He always ends up like 7 feet from it. I was watching all of his buckets from this game where he had a career outburst, and I'm watching him like, I don't like any of these shots. You ended up 7 feet from the rim, stood up, completely stymied by future accountants, and then you're like hoisting in like a 7-foot turnaround. Didn't love it.
I mean, there's great sizzles out there where like I think Nate Duncan will post game highlights where he still misses shots, but he's like, I like where he moves on the court. I like where he's occupying space. He's in the position for a rebound. And there's a great idea of that people are starting to talk about on my feed where jumping in the right place. And like Patrick Williams from Chicago, I think only has like 3 dunks this year because he's jumping in the wrong places.
Bro.
Incredible idea, stats wise.
Did you watch the video?
Yeah, it's weird. He's like 6'7".
I was crying with laughter. Like,
Maybe I saw it
when I
because you
say,
retweeted it. Yeah.
yeah, I would, and I mean this genuinely, not as a figure of speech. I had tears running down my
You love
face
this
from
shit.
watching
You're
this
about this
video
life. Yep.
because it was not just like, hey, here's an interesting stat. Patrick Williams is bad at dunking, you know, and
Yep.
It wasn't just the stat, and the stat is real, and it was like an exhaustive film breakdown, and it's just clip after clip after clip after clip of
Him rising up for dunks that are no chance, man.
Like
No
I'm
chance.
almost weeping. I'm almost weeping again thinking about it. It was like, but he missed every kind. It was like
Yeah.
ones where he was totally
One
wide
foot.
open. He just like and he just like throws the ball over the rim. There were ones where he goes up and he gets stuffed. ones where he loses control, ones where he never gets the ball over the cylinder, like every variety of missed
Yes.
dunk, just one after another, and this very sort of calm, patient analysis. Like another thing is he seems to jump from too far away. He thinks he can get higher than he can. And it's like
Mamba
clip
mentality.
after clip of him like stuffing himself on the rim. Oh man, I really enjoyed that video immeasurably.
Oh my god, it's like the meme of like the cat standing next to the lion, right? Or like yawning like a lion roars. And he's tall and he was a high draft pick. Um, Hilarious, right? And we've talked about this idea before, talk about Amari Stoudemire, no lack of effort ever. The dude had the Mamba mentality on the court, but just kind of stood in the wrong place. We talk about spatial awareness, but like, no sin bin, people talk a lot about good footy players' first touch. And a lot of Messi's success is because his first touches are just beautiful and it sets himself up for success. And if you don't have that, you're screwed. Once you jump, you've committed. Like they always say, if you're trapped, do not jump. Do not put yourself in the situation where you just have to throw the ball away. And like a lot of these players do have effort and they don't block a lot of shots or dunk a lot because jumping at the right time is a skill.
There's
It's
a guy
like most
who
obvious thing.
there's a guy who played at a high level of college ball who plays pickup with us sometimes, and he's in his 30s and he had knee injuries and stuff like that. I mean, at one point he was, I would say, a marginal pro prospect. He's big, he's skilled, he can shoot, but destroyed his knee, and that kind of ended his college career, even though he played pro overseas.
Sucks.
There's stuff that he does, and you're like, oh, I just can't do that. And I don't even mean like, oh, he's just raining from half court threes. Like that's a specific skill set. But it's like picking up his dribble and then having this cognizance of like where on the floor defenders are coming by, where he can get to, where he can be in a position that he has optionality, let's say. He picks up his dribble, but he still has an extra step. He can go up with his right. If the defender comes there, he can take one more step. He can slow it down. He can go and finish with his left. And like, just the way that after the ball has been collected, there are like 6 moves that are sort of at his disposal. It's not this, now I just have to get to the basket as soon as I can and get this shot up. Right. It's extremely patient, which again, I think is a product of him having knee injuries and being older.
Larry Johnson.
But that's something that like, I don't watch someone like Cooper Flagg and be like, oh, you're figuring this out and you're getting to the basket exactly how you want. It's like, no, you're running into the defender.
Yeah.
And then throwing a shot up over your shoulder. You aren't, there's no manipulation there. And again, not to talk about the Sixers, but this is a Maxey thing too. Maxey's just trying to beat you to the basket. There's no guile. There's no trick. There's no treachery.
Sleight of hand. There's no Wemby playing chess. Like you're making me think of the last great white hope of the NBA and the viral video he had. Brian Scalabrine taking all those guys out in the YMCA because they're like, we could beat this clown. Like he's old, he's fat, he's white. We got him. And all those clips, I'm like, for sure he's skilled as a shooter, but he's just taking angles away from everybody. And these guys are straight line players because they're accountants, they're tech people, they're successful in other ways of life. But Scalabrine looks at them and like, you're a straight line player, you're a bucket getter. I'm just going to take that angle away from you just with one bump of a hip, or just by tricking you into thinking that I'm going to take a layup on the right and then going with my opposite hand. You just can't defend it. You can't block it. You can't pace it and or measure the steps. Cooper Flagg, I guess, as to your point, we'll find out against better players, but so far he's had so much success taking direct lines to the basket. Why wouldn't he do anything else? He's going to be the top pick anyway. So we'll see when he plays against like chess players like Victor Wembanyama.
Well, look, maybe he is going to be such a physical specimen that he'll be able to do this stuff. You know, like he's Psycho T with more ups and,
Damn, Tyler Hands, bro.
And a jumper. I mean, maybe he's going to be
He's
a really
Grayson
good
Allen with a mean
rebounder,
streak. Yeah.
but maybe he's going to be a great defender. He's going to block shots. He's going to rebound. He's going to, like, that's where he'll be great. And then on
We
the other
expect
side
him
of the
to be
ball,
everything, right? We
I mean,
the
if you're a
expectation
savior, you got to do it all. But I'm saying if he has those defensive instincts and he's a good passer, maybe he won't be defined by his like straight line driving.
yeah.
I gotta say, I really have been impressed by the passes he makes, specifically to like other bigs, which I
Yeah.
think is key if you're going to be a 4 who gets the ball a lot and you're not going to be a 5, which he doesn't look like. Is that
Yeah. Yeah.
he can
And there's
find
that Blake
that
yeah.
5.
There's your Blake Griffin comparison. Blake is actually a pretty good passer when in his prime.
I agree. So we were talking. I'm talking about the lingua franca of contemporary culture. What do you think about tweaking the LiAngelo Ball viral hit that's
Tweaking.
taking over? Tweaker, excuse me.
I was delighted to see the NBA community, to see like a glimpse into the familial and the kind of like closeness that these guys share. Because LiAngelo, obviously, the third ball, who is not in the NBA currently, and like a little bit of a villain, a little bit of a new buck, like is not a classical Jordan originalist. And then his song drops, of course, like maybe Lonzo wrote it, but these guys are always, the Ball brothers are always involved in extracurricular shit. And everyone was psyched on it. It's like, oh, you playing that LiAngelo? I'm like, oh, this is a really like, what's the right word? Respectful community. I was like, you're not gonna like clown this guy. Like he doesn't have enough game to play in the NBA. He talks a lot of shit. He's a zoomer, and everyone's just like, "Oh, I haven't heard it yet. Yo, play it. Oh, I like this." And like, it's kind of a sweet thing, isn't it?
I agree with all that. That it felt like every basketball player heard it first because
Yeah.
it was one of their contemporaries, and
Yeah.
also the Ball family's famous. I mean, even if he wasn't the brother of LaMelo and Lonzo, and he wasn't the son of LeVar, it would have been a different response. But he is part of a kind of iconic basketball family, big baller brand, baby.
Yeah.
So he has cachet that another guy who didn't make the NBA doesn't have. But this song was a little different too because it wasn't like okay, Miles Bridges is doing an off the radar freestyle.
Right. How come Miles Bridges doesn't get this heat? He's actually a good rapper.
Exactly. So this was unique though because I was talking to our buddy Tommy and he was like, "Yeah, it's kind of like Old Town Road,
No.
where
Yeah, sure.
it's less that people think the song is good or even really like the song, but it's an idea." And it went viral early on because it sounded like a Big Timer song or a Nelly song. It has
Yeah,
this
people were psyched. Right.
nostalgic early 2000s, whoa, like this riding music that was like, yeah, very mostly like deep South Midwestern
Shout out
style
to
to
Manny
it.
Fresh. Yeah. Yeah, and I kind of wanted to, yeah, you basically articulated the pro cell conversation I wanted to have better than I did. It's like a new nostalgia. It hits at the right time. It's the right time period. Obviously, Old Town Road existed way beforehand, but it hit everybody at the time where they wanted it. I was like, oh yeah, I want this. It's like, well, Miles Bridges has
Yes,
like a
yes.
rapidy thing. It's like, well, respect to Miles Bridges as a rapper, but like, we don't want that right now.
What I mean Old Time Road is less the nostalgia or they wanted the country sound, but it's like an audio joke or meme that
Hmm.
catches like wildfire because I mean, it's a song that we sing, but I mean that in the way that when we're talking about a concept versus a literal song,
Right.
but it's a joke that everybody is in on.
Yep.
And it's not that we're making fun of the song. It's more like oh, bend the corner. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Like everyone knows this is it's a call and response that
Yeah.
when that song drops, it's funny. When people put it into like a remix of with Manny Fresh on it, it's like, okay, that it's funny. When a, I think it was like, it wasn't Yo Gotti, it was another one of those guys from Memphis was like, hey, I want to jump on that.
So rich.
And
Yeah.
again, it's a joke that everyone knows. And I hope it becomes like a hit record because I don't know that anybody actually likes it. And I mean this with all love. It's like, it's just a thing.
I you kind of stole my take because I was going to say this is a true test of how cool the NBA is because it's been accepted. The gatekeepers of the NBA are like, we're down for this song. That has not transferred to the fans, the popular, like obviously no one's going to be bumping it on Canal Street because Canal Street's empty now because of a $9 surcharge. But is it going to hit our ears outside of the context of an NBA locker room or an NBA highlight or an arena? I don't know how cool these athletes are because they're all nerds. We've talked about this before. They're record producers. Dr. Dre's a nerd. Manny Fresh is a nerd. E40's a nerd. And like Kevin Durant's not cool. The Ball brothers are not cool. Although I love LaMelo. God, did you see that highlight of him be like, how'd you get your voice like that? You do the reporting
good.
for sure. Like, how
Yeah, he's great.
likable is this kid?
He's awesome.
How'd you get your voice like that?
So this was a tweet that someone put up yesterday. They said, as the Bills head into the locker room, they're singing Tweaker. They're absolutely belting it out earlier in the week in the locker room.
Hey,
So, like,
crossover.
it's crossing over in the same way that Jim Jones Ballers did in a while back because he
That
had the
was in
little
college,
motion of
though.
the jump shot. Oh
Yeah.
no, it did not start within the NBA locker room and crossover,
Yeah.
but it had that like same with Black and Yellow. There was like a weird sports
Sure.
tie-in because of Pittsburgh and the Steelers, and this has. I like your point. Like, will the NBA embracing this as a joke keep it just within NBA circles? Is it going to be something that will actually get to the radio and be a real hit? Or is it just like, the Blake Griffin cuck chair leaned up against the door with DeAndre Jordan? That everybody sees that image who's an NBA fan, they know what it is, but ultimately
Right.
there's no cross-cultural relevancy to it.
Right. And it doesn't have to be, but I'm just curious, right? Like if I'm trying to look back at my life, I'm not dead yet. Listen, I'm not Danny Ainge just yet. But if I want to look like back at my life and be like, where did I waste time and where did I not waste time? Sports is a tough one, and I say that because like it feels like such an insular experience that I've had so much fun in, but it doesn't cross over to bigger ideas, bigger concerns, bigger things. Like, for example, like the disaster in LA, we were like, how do we help? Is there a basketball way to do this? Because we do a basketball pod. And I'm like, this is just bigger than basketball. Of course. It's bigger than everything. But like, it made me realize how small basketball was. Like, I was like talking to someone, like, JJ Redick lost his house. And they're like, who's JJ Redick? I'm like, just the smartest basketball coach that ever lived.
Just the greatest podcaster / player / coach
Woo! Paul
ever.
George, take that, playoff P. Some guys mastered both.
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? Because I would not say there has ever been a song that started within basketball as a community.
Chicago
And I don't
Bulls
just
team.
right.
John Tesh. Like, what are we doing?
Right, maybe.
Well, it
yeah,
doesn't
like-
really.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like even the biggest hit that a rapper was ever on was probably Fushnikins, and that was a hit because Fushnikins was already a notable group, and Shaq was a known basketball player who jumped on the song as like a novelty,
Right.
and that helped the popularity of it because Shaq was a phenomenon. But it was
Yeah.
also as like it's funny he's rapping, but he was rapping with a group. And
It
Shaq
was
never
Curtis.
had a he never had a hit song himself.
No, no. I mean, Fushigin song was kind of a hit, right? For Curtis Blow, basketball. It
But that's
it
different,
gets
right? Because that's about basketball from someone
right.
who's just a fan of the sport. Yeah, I can't think of anything that began within basketball. I mean, Allen Iverson, 40 bars. That's not a hit. That's a
No,
basketball thing.
yeah. Yo, you know what I just realized as we're talking about this? Have they scrubbed "Jump Around" from arenas? I've not heard it in the last couple years.
Mm. I never wrote the article, but I was researching jump ball music a while back. And I talked to some people from the Nets and maybe the Clippers, a few different places. And there was like I don't know how many there were, but there's like the canon of jump ball songs. And I wrote this a few years back, right? So like at that point, Van Halen Jump was
Yeah,
still in it. Now it's
incredible.
gone. It's
Yeah, it's
been
gone.
pushed out. It's been pushed
Yeah,
out. But Van Halen Jump was one. Crisscross Jump still in the mix.
yeah,
House
uh,
of Pain, Jump Around,
yeah.
Busta Rhymes, Pass the
Uh-huh.
Cavassier. Everybody
Mhm.
jump, jump,
Yeah,
whatever that one
yeah.
is. That's House of Pain. But anyway, Pass the Cavassier was in
Uh-huh.
that mix. And then Drake and was it Future with Jumpman?
Yep, yep. I mean, maybe we about it in private because it's certainly $1 million idea. But I
You
was
sure you
like,
want to divulge it here?
I mean, we're no Leangelo Balls. I mean, we should have created some songs for every action on the court. When there's like a replay, it's like this is the replay. Jump around, it's a replay, you know. Or if there's
It's a
like
motherfucking replay.
yeah, if there's a traveling call, it's like I'm traveling, you know, just like give give an artist an excuse to make that song, sort of like Mariah Carey.
Loose ball, foul.
Yeah, yeah. They're mogging on him. They're mogging on him. It's like,
Coach's challenge.
yeah, technical
Who's challenging
foul.
the
Yeah, travel. Yeah, it's everything on the court.
coach?
But you would have to get Leangelo Ball to do it all. You would have to have access.
I mean, it's a great concept because like you could kind of mix them all up even in different songs. Like, okay, the bridge of this one's going to be kind of like 3 seconds, like three
Yeah.
seconds, and then like all right, and then the hook though is going to be more about like referee timeout or
Mm-hmm.
inadvertent whistle,
Commercial break. Here we go.
inadvertent whistle.
Right. Yeah, fuck, man. I wanted our buddy Pablo to do a story about Jump Around and like they're in cahoots with somebody. I want him to find out because is it something that Adam Silver imposes on arenas or do arena DJs
Yes,
figure that
yes,
out? The
totally.
DJ.
From this may have changed, but when I talked to various people, one of them was I think J Period, who's a
Oh shit.
Brooklyn DJ,
Yeah.
or it was DJ Soul. It was one of those two.
Shout out to those kings for sure.
I forget which one. They both worked from the Nets at different times, if I remember correctly. I forget which one I spoke with because again, this was a while back. It was when they first moved to Brooklyn, and they were like, "Yeah, you got to keep like Jump Around.
Yeah.
Like you
sure.
can't blow Jump Around in the first half. Like that's a key one to hold. Keep your powder dry for
Yeah.
fourth quarter jump ball. Like doom 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 doom.
Dude,
And like
Smith's
and
Night,
then
Boy with the
let's
Thorn in
hear
His
those.
Side, 2 a.m. Yeah. Do not play the hits. Do not play Panic before 2 a.m.
Exactly. Gotta keep that Jump Around. That was the key. Crisscross Jump. That's like a second half one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gosh, right, because there's like a pacing. Is there a style guide for DJs in the NBA? Have they written this out?
I don't think so. It's also odd that you can tell certain stadiums have certain aesthetics, right? Like Philly
Oh, yeah.
Philly plays a lot of like newer rap. A lot of it. Brooklyn plays tons of like 90s rap in the mix, right? The Spurs during games I take that back. The Jazz played tons of like mid '90s
Mormon
instrumentals.
music? Oh, okay.
Oh no, it's like thick
Mormon
ones,
Yeah.
like Tried by 12. Like they play
What?
like yeah, no, it's weird. It's like I've heard Tried by 12 multiple times during jazz games.
You know what you haven't heard multiple times during jazz, Steve?
Perfect podcast.
Perfect pods? Yeah, it's ambient. It's going on.
Cookies.
Walking
I
around.
love cookies.
Cookies.
I love cookies.
I wanted to interrupt.